of our limited review of this set. We're doing draft, we're doing sealed, and we're talking about any cards that particularly shine or have special kind of stuff going on with Two-Headed Giant. Let's come on down to the first thing right here with his Bearer of Silence, and it's 1 and a black for a 2/1 Devoid Eldrazi. When you cast it, you may pay 1 and a colorless. If you do, target opponent sacrifices a creature, flying, and Bearer of Silence cannot block. It's a rare. This is an aggressive card, and sacrificing a creature can range anywhere from they're going to sacrifice an Eldrazi Scion to quite... Oh, we have a little bit of line there. To quite large and powerful creatures. So there's a lot of variance here. How good the card is. The floor is very low, sacrificing an Eldrazi Scion, and the ceiling is very high, sacrificing a bomb. So you really have to ask yourself, how much does your deck want a 2/1 flyer that can't block? It's an aggressive card. There is an aggressive black deck. It'll fit there well. If you're playing that deck, it's pretty good. But I think overall, it's like a C-, just a 2/1 flyer that can't block is not the best card usually, even if it is getting you a card by paying the extra 1 and a colorless. I just don't think it's going to perform as well in Limited as it will other formats. Dread Defiler is 6 and a black for a 6/8 Eldrazi Devoid. That's a lot of toughness. 3 and a colorless, exile a creature card from your graveyard. Target opponent loses life equal to the exiled card's power. Okay, so that effect, 3 and a colorless, to essentially exile one of your cards to make your opponent lose a bunch of life, is very powerful. It's going to kill them very quickly, especially because you have a 6/8 body that can play defense or offense. It's a card they have to block because it's a 6/8. That will kill them very quickly. But also, it blocks very well as a 6/8, allowing you to essentially prevent your opponent from attacking you, and you're using this ability probably once or twice per turn at that point. It's a good finisher. I'm not sure if black is usually going to play that slow. For me, I think it's a B-. It is a powerful card. 7 mana is a lot to ask for, though. It doesn't ask us a lot of black mana, and it doesn't ask us a lot of colorless mana. If you have 2 colorless sources, you can do this as many times as you're basically going to be able to a turn. You're not usually going to have 12 mana available. I'm happy with it. I would definitely play the first one of these. It would make me be happy to be in black. I'm not sure that I would always first pick it, but I'm definitely willing to try it out. So I'm going to give it a B-, although it could be lower than that. Essence Depleter is 2 and a black for a 2/3 Eldrazi Drone Devoid. 1 and a colorless, target opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. That effect isn't the reason to pick the card. You're picking essentially a colorless 2/3 for 3, and it will let you drain 1, maybe 2 times a turn. I do not think you will have 3 sources of colorless usually. That seems very tricky. If you do, it's a little bit better, but I don't think that this card is extremely powerful. I'm going to go ahead and give it a C. I think it just falls somewhere in the middle. Maybe I'm underestimating this drain ability, but to me, having to pay for the drain makes it much worse than you would normally think. Flaying Tendrils is 1 black for a Devoid sorcery. All creatures get -2/-2 until end of turn. If a creature would die this turn, exile it instead. Very powerful. This is the kind of card that is going to really mess up a lot of things for your opponents. You can play it early at 3 mana. I think that it's very important because we have the 4 mana version with Awaken, but 3 mana works better with Surge. Later we'll see some Surge red cards, and the fact that I can play Flaying Tendrils, weaken a card, and then maybe play one of the red Surge burn spells to further weaken the card and kill it, is a big deal. We're going to see cards that care about power and interact with power in interesting ways. You can play Flaying Tendrils and then attack into your opponent's board. We saw the white card that destroys a creature with 2 or less power. Well, they're 4/4, now will be a 2/2, and you can use that ability, or whatever the toughness is, but you can get the power down, and there are cards that care about power in this set, which also play well with Flaying Tendrils. I'm going to go ahead and give Flaying Tendrils a B-. It's a card I'm going to be very happy to pick early and kind of build a deck around. It's going to give you a strong effect, and remember, in Two-Headed Giant, the board is bigger, so global effects are better. If you guys manage to get 1 or 2 of these in your pool, you can kind of build your decks together in a way that are less affected than your opponents, which will usually have plenty of 2 toughness creatures. Havoc Solar is 3 and a black for a 3/3 Devoid. And you can play 1 and a colorless to give it +2/+1 until end of turn. That's strong. You only have to do that once a turn for it to be attacking as a 5/4 or representing the threat of activation. And threat of activation essentially means, your opponent can't just block with their 3/3 because you could just spend 2 mana to kill their card and they would be down a card for 2 mana and it's terrible for them. But you attack with the creature, they don't block, then you play your next drop. You play your 4 or 5 mana card because you could have activated it. They have to respect it, and then you don't have to activate it usually. But if you want to, it's not an unreasonable position to activate this once or twice, and it becomes a 5 and then a 7 power creature. So that's quite strong. For me, I think this is a C+. I think the first one is extremely intimidating. There's many times this will be able to take down very, very strong opposing creatures as well. Inverter of Truth is next. It is 2 black for 6/6 Eldrazi Devoid flying. When it enters the battlefield, exile all cards from your library face down, then shuffle all cards from your graveyard into your library. This is not the kind of card we can take advantage of, usually in limited. Usually this card will just kill you. So here's the tricky part. On turn 4, you usually have like 1 to 3 cards max in your graveyard. And that is not enough turns to win with a 6/6 flying. Always, it's a high-risk position. But if you're playing this later and you have 5 or 6 cards in your graveyard, you could be in an okay spot. A 6/6 flyer is a must-answer card and will win you the game. So this is like a build-around type card. Like, you have to make sure that your deck goes long enough that you have enough turns to win with it. Advantage to this card is if you just have 6 cards in your graveyard, they're all probably decent cards. They're going to usually be things like removal spells, some amount of creatures, etc. So this card isn't unplayable, but it is asking quite a bit of you. It's very powerful. It pays you off. If I had 7 cards in my graveyard and they were all pretty good, I could probably win with 7 turns of my 6/6. That said, if they kill your 6/6, you're going to die. So, this card's like a B-. When it works, you're going to win very, very quickly, very, very strong. But the downside is you are going to lose the game if this doesn't go well. So you really have to make sure the cards in your graveyard either protect this well enough to make sure you're going to win, or that they are strong enough cards to win on their own. Let's go ahead and head down to the next card, which we have is Kozlak Shrieker. 2 and a black for a 3/2 Devoid. Pay a colorless. It gets +1/+0 and menace. You can do this multiple times. Like, say you had 2 colorless, you can make it a 4/2 with menace. Menace doesn't stack, but it does damage, does more damage. I think 3 for a 3/2 is generally fine, and the fact that it can make it so your opponent has to block and you can make it a 5/2 or a 4/2 pretty easily, and you can get 2 creatures is pretty cool. I think it's just a C overall, but it's a card I'm happy to have. Kozlak's Translator is 4 and a black for a 3/5 Devoid. Pay 1 life, add 1 mana, colorless mana to your mana pool. I like this card. I like this card a lot. You can basically get a free mana out of it every turn. It gets that mana, and you can block. That's a big deal. Like that, I can play this on turn 5. Probably not doing anything then, but I can like activate one of my cool Kozlak Shrieker ability or some such like that. And I didn't have to tap this. I can use it on the turn I needed to. And then the next turn I can activate Kozlak Shrieker again, and I have my Kozlak's Translator to keep back on blocks. All that said, I think this card is still just maybe a C+. I really like being able to get a repeatable source of colorless on such a toughness-oriented body. So it's going to be fairly reliable to stay alive. Also, this is a really cool art. Just want to point that out that like they've done a really good job kind of describing the weirdness that is Kozlak. I just wanted to throw that out there while we're going through it. And Kozlak's Translator is really pushing that out there. And the fact that you're adding mana is a really not black ability, but paying life is a really black ability. All right, the reason to be in black: 3 and a black, sorcery, devoid, exile target creature, Oblivion Strike. That's just awesome. That's a really good rate nowadays for removal, and I'm gonna take as many of these as I can get. I think it's a solid B. It plays well with the other processing cards and stuff that you get later. in the last packs or anything that cares about exiled cards. And 4 mana just to kill anything is great. The only time you're going to be unhappy with this card is against very, very tiny oriented swarm decks. But this is going to answer lots of great cards. It answers all of their bombs. It's sorcery speed for just 4 mana. So you're usually going to get a chance to cast it as well. You don't have to wait till turn 5 or 6 to kill their biggest card. Just 4 mana, it's gone. There's no way to get it back. They can't kill an enchantment to get it back or anything like that. I'm very happy with this card. I think it's one of the main reasons to play black, and it earns that B just by being a simple removal spell. Reaver Drone. Black for a 2/1 Devoid. At the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life unless you control another colorless creature. If you're aggressive enough to be wanting 1 mana 2/1s, then this card's fine. I don't think 2/1s are good. This isn't a card I usually want to play, so I'm going to give it a C- in the rare deck that... Actually, I'm going to give it a D+. In the rare deck that wants a 1-drop into other drops, it'll be fine. That'll be like the black-red aggressive Devoid deck, or black-red aggressive deck in general. Sifter of Skulls. 3 and a black for a 4/3 Eldrazi Devoid. Whenever another non-token creature dies that you control, put a 1/1 Eldrazi Scion onto the battlefield, and it sacrifices for mana. This card's awesome. It's 4 for a 4/3. That's fine, although, as we saw with Broodhunter Worm, not great. A lot of Broodhunter Worm's not great, and this also came from the fact that green was not that great. This is a rare, but the fact that I can on turn 4 play my guy, attack with my creatures, and then if you make trades, I get 1/1s is very powerful. I think this card is a B+. I think it's going to build you giant boards. It makes it very hard for your opponent to enter combat and to win races or to do anything significant. And it's a must-kill creature. I think it's one of the best black creatures as well. Sky Scourer. 1 and a black for a 1/2 flying Devoid. Whenever you cast a color spell, it gets +1/+0. This is a card that outside of the colorless deck, I think is a D+. Inside the colorless deck, it is probably closer to a C, maybe even a C+, because it does an extra damage each time you play another spell, and it gets through more damage over and over. It's really good in sort of this black-red aggressive deck, or if you manage to get a mono-black or black and another colorless. Devoid, it's better in black Devoid decks by quite a bit. Outside of black Devoid decks, I would not be willing to play it. Or if I just absolutely had to play some sort of creature just to fill a curve. Slaughter Drone is 1 in the black for a 2/2 Eldrazi Drone. That card by itself is not great, but the fact that you can play colors to give it Death Touch until end of turn means that it gains quite a bit of value if you can do that. It plays better on offensive and defensive positions as a Death Touch creature. It can make sure your opponent's kind of in a rougher spot. That said, you do have to leave the mana open for that to activate. It's not an innate ability. So for me, this is just a simple C, even though Death Touch is very powerful in a set like this, and that it has more than 1 toughness, means that it can kill these Scions and stuff like that. I don't think that it's great. I just think it's acceptable. Unnatural Endurance is black for an instant. It's Devoid. Target creature gets +2/+0 and regenerate it. These kind of combat tricks depend on the format. The fact that it saves your card from some cards is really good. It prevents it from dying. The fact that, we saw up here, one of the most important removal spells is Oblivion Strike, and we have other removal, exile type effects, makes regeneration a little bit weaker than it sometimes is. The 2 power means that it will trade in combat fairly well as well. You can attack your, 2/1 into their 5/5 or their 5/4, and you will basically trade an Unnatural Endurance for their 5/4. That's awesome. It's only 1 mana, which I think is also powerful. I think overall the card is probably a C+. I know that seems kind of high when I talked about all the exile effects, but the fact that it only costs 1 mana and will often save your creatures during combat is a big deal to me. And you can also use this on your opponent's creatures. I know that seems a little bit odd, but only costing 1 mana will make this a very good Surge Enabler as well. And overall, I think that's why it deserves the C+. I think that's probably one of the more controversial grades I've given and probably will give overall. Visions of Brutality is 1 in the black for a Devoid enchantment. Just kind of interesting. But enchanted creature can't block. Whenever enchanted creature deals damage, its controller loses that much life. So what's going on here is that this is a card, if you're aggressive, they can't block, so you can attack, and they attack back, they lose that much life. Now, it's a triggered ability. So, if you're at 5 life and they deal 5 damage and they have 5 life, you will die. They will not. But I don't think I'm normally going to play this card. I'd have to be extremely aggressive just to consider it. If you're willing to pay 1 and a black, enchanted creature can't block, then this card is good enough. I don't think you're normally going to play that card. So for me, this is a D-. It'll occasionally be played in the very aggressive black decks, which will usually be Devoid, which will help the Visions as a Devoid card, and etc. Witness the End. 3 and a black, sorcery Devoid. Target opponent exiles 2 cards and from their hand and loses 2 life. In Sealed, this is very good. In 2-Headed Giant, this card's probably even better because it's a very strong effect and you get to choose which of the 2 people lose the 2 cards, and someone will almost always have cards for you to take. In Draft, it's a little bit trickier. One of the reasons I liked the Awaken version of this card is that it could awaken and make a body. This one doesn't. It exiles the card, which is an advantage, especially when it comes to processor effects, which you may or may not have. But losing 2 life is much worse than making a body. So I think overall I'm going to play this card less than I would the Awaken version, and I didn't play the Awaken version that often. So for me, it is a D+ in drafts. But it's very good in Sealed. Corpse Churn. 1 and a black. Instant. Put the top 3 cards of your graveyard library into your graveyard, and then you may return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So trying to give you card advantage by milling a card into your graveyard and then putting it into your hand with selection, I don't think that's worth doing for the most part. I'm not going to play this card for the most part. It would be a weird situation. I'd have to have some sort of graveyard deck, and I don't think there is one, especially with all the exile going on. So for me, this is just a D+, or a D. Not going to almost ever play that. Draenei's Chosen is 3 and a black for a 2/2 vampire shaman ally and cohort. Remember, that's tapping another ally. Put a 2/2 black zombie creature onto the battlefield tapped. Now, there's not a ton of allies in black, but if you are paired with an ally color, that's the kind of effect I'm willing to go in on. To me, that's a B. It's making a 2/2 every turn. If I can get another ally and that rolling, I'm getting a 2/2 every turn. My opponent really has to answer that. It's not too hard to answer a 2/2. But once I get 1 activation out, I've gotten 4 power and toughness for 4 mana. I'm happy. And if I get more than that, I'm very happy. So I think that that's earning its B. Grasp of Darkness is black. Target creature gets -4/-4. Instant. Uncommon. Excellent. You do need to be in black. Remember, black is a real cost. It's not easy just to have 2 black mana whenever you want. But it will kill most creatures. It's a powerful effect. I'm going to pick it fairly highly, and it's an instant. Wish Potato is pointing out that Draenei's Chosen works well in the 4-color ally deck, and the multicolor ally deck is better. We'll get more into that when we get to the lands and the green cards. But it's even fine in 2-color ally deck. You don't have to have a ton of allies for Draenei's Chosen to do a lot of work. And most of the creatures in this set are allies or Eldrazi, which helps cohort out quite a bit as well. But Grasp of Darkness is great. Just having to leave up 2 mana for an instant speed removal spell that will kill most creatures other than giant bombs is a big boon. So I'm going to go ahead and give this a solid B as one of the better removal spells for doing kind of cool stuff or blowing people out, right? For 4 mana, you can just exile a creature, but for 2 mana, you can pretty often get the 2-for-1 that you want to get. Kalidas, Trader of Get, is 2 black for a 3/4 lifelink, legendary creature, vampire warrior. That's strong. I like a 4 mana, 3/4 lifelink. It's great. If a non-creature token an opponent controls would die, exile it instead. You get a 2/2 black zombie. That's also very strong. I'm very interested in this as well. 2 and a black, sacrifice another vampire or zombie. Put 2/1 counters on Kalidas, Trader of Get. Wow, that's great. All these really, really great abilities basically sum up to what I think is an A. Your opponent has to answer this card. It comes down early. They're going to have to block it, probably. If they are blocking it, you're probably getting 2/2s. If you have any tricks, it puts them even further behind. And then you can grow your way out of a lot of different removal spells. So Kalidas, Trader of Get's the kind of card that I'm going to go in on first. It's a solid A minus for me, just because of how good it is for the cost. It's usually going to win the game if you can play it before turn, or on any turn, but if you play it before turn 6, there's not many cards that can compete with it. If you play any removal spell, it can easily just become a 5/4 lifelink, and your opponent's down a card, or you can have a 3/4 and a 2/2. You getting to choose all these different things, and them having so many variables makes it a very hard card to play against. I think it's probably the best black card in the set. Malakar Soothsayer is 4 and a black for a 4/4 Vampire Shaman Ally. Now, the fact that it's 4 and a black for a 4/4 means that it's already pretty solid. It doesn't have to have a great cohort ability, but it happens that it is cohort, draw a card, and lose life, which is a great cohort ability. Black doesn't have a lot of cohorts, but the ones that have are very potent. For me, this is a B. Drawing a card every turn, being a 4/4. It's really worth it to splash the black cohort cards in, or find a way to make cohort work if you are black cohort. They don't have bad cohort cards, but we also see that they're mostly at rare and uncommon. There's not a lot of rarities. Null Caller is 3 and a black for a 2/4 Vampire Shaman. So this is one of the few creatures that's not a ally. It's just a vampire. 3 and a black for a 2/4 is fine. I like that. It's good defensive stats, and it has an ability. 3 black, exile a creature card from your graveyard. Put a 2/2 black zombie onto the battlefield tapped. Now, it's tapped, so that means that it's hard to have surprise blockers and all that. But it does put a lot of pressure on your opponent, and it does make multiple blockers. And as a 2/4, it's a fine blocker on its own. So I think this is a pretty powerful card. For me, it's a B minus. It is expensive to make those creatures, but the fact that it 4 for a 2/4 is fine. And later in the game, when you have less stuff to do, that you can just pay 4 mana or even 8 mana and start turning your creatures into creatures in your graveyard into resources is pretty powerful. Remorseless Punishment is 3 black, sorcery. Target opponent loses 5 lives unless that player discards 2 cards or sacrifices a creature or planeswalker. Repeat this process once. So in theory, they would lose 10 life, but in reality, they're going to sacrifice a creature and lose 5 life, which is fine. They won't have a planeswalker usually, or they're going to discard 2 cards that aren't that great. Or maybe they're going to discard 2 cards that are pretty great to stay alive. The fact your opponent gets all the choices makes this card a lot worse. I'm probably not going to play it too often just because they have lots of choices, but none of those choices are great. But like the worst case scenario is you pay 5 and they sacrifice 2 Eldrazi Scions. The best case scenario is, they're in a situation where they have to get rid of their entire board or they die. But they can also just take 10 damage. If you're not an aggressive deck, this card's not going to do too much. The one place I do like this is if you're a very aggressive black deck and this is at the top of your curve. Because your opponent's probably used a lot of their resources, and you making them discard 4 cards or sacrifice 2 creatures or lose 10 life in any combination is very powerful. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a C minus. I don't think it's great, but I do think it is acceptable in the sort of top end of a really aggressive black deck. Tar Snare, 2 and a black. Target creature gets -3, -2 until end of turn. Black has a lot of really good removal. This is really good removal. I'm happy to play this. You can win a lot of combats this way. You can just reach out and kill small utility creatures pretty well. It is -3, -2, and a lot of the utility creatures do have 3 toughness. So you have to find a way to do something about that, whether it's in combat or not. But taking off 3 power does mean that you can gang block pretty well as well. I would probably give this a C+. And there's a lot of good removal. We've seen 3 really good black removal spells. Untamed Hunger is 2 and a black. Aura. Enchanted creature gets +2/+1 in menace. I'm not down for this. I'm going to go ahead and give this a D+. Not a card I want to play usually. It's just too risky to play auras. Vampire Envoy is 2 and a black for a 1/4 flying vampire cleric ally. I like that. That's a good defensive card. And it can get in some amount of damage. Whenever Vampire Envoy becomes tapped, you gain 1 life. So it can attack, gain you a life, so you can hit your opponent and kind of do a 2-point life swing there. More importantly, You can have a 1/4 flyer that can block really well, and whenever you cohort, you gain a life, and that's also a nice effect as well. I think that this plays extremely well and will tie together the black-white ally deck that gains some life, is less focused on that than it was before overall, but has a lot of powerful sort of allies and cohort effects to go with it. I think this card is just a C overall. You don't mind playing them. A 1/4 flying is more of a defensive card. It's not doing too much, but it has a lot of synergy effects in the cohort deck itself. Alright, and Zulaport Chain Mage is 3 and a black for a 4/2 human shaman ally. Cohort, target opponent loses 2 life. It's an aggressive cohort card. It has 4 power, so it attacks well. It trades well. It's not going to keep back a lot of small creatures, but it'll kill a big creature. And the fact that you can just tap something to make that happen is a big deal. And the fact that it puts pressure on the opponent. The opponent does need to answer the Zulaport Chain Mage, otherwise they will lose the game to it. It's not my favorite card. I think overall it's just a C. It is easy to answer with just 2 toughness, but it does put the onus on your opponent to come back and kind of find a way to kill your creature. Otherwise, they're going to lose the game. I want to point out the removal in black. We've got Tar Snare, which is 1. We've got Grasp of Darkness, which is 2. We've got, it's a little bit higher up here, Oblivion Strike, and it's 3. And 2 of those are at common, and one of them is at uncommon, and then Flaying Tendrils, which is 4. So 2 common and 2 uncommon removal spells, and they're all very good. Like, none of those are overcosted. The worst of the whole bunch is Tar Snare, and it's still an instant. Removal is great in black. I think the black is my favorite color so far, with just the amount of removal it has access to. That said, I think one of the weaknesses is that there are token producers in this set, especially in white, and you'll see some in green as well, which will kind of have offset the strength of the single removal spells. Alright guys, we're about to go to red and talk about it. You guys just give me 1 second. I'm going to hit the bathroom real quick, and I'll be right back.